Now that you have an understanding of the ethical principles that can guide mentoring, let's try and put these into practice. In this brief video, we will discuss ethical problem solving. It is likely that during the duration of your mentoring relationship, you will encounter an ethical dilemma and that you will be unsure how to respond to it. The goal of this video is to provide you with a strategy for approaching these problems. Ethical decision-making is tough. Often, we encounter situations that don't have a clear right answer. Thus, in these situations, it's helpful to have a model to guide our decision-making process in order to come up with an appropriate response. On this slide, I provide the ethical decision-making model that is adapted from the Canadian Psychological Association. The CPA's original model is also discussed in the aforementioned book by Truscott and Crook. These steps can be easily applied to situations in which a mentor is faced with an ethical dilemma in the context of their mentoring relationship. Let's take a closer look. The first step requires you to initially consider the individuals that are affected by the situation. Obviously, it's almost always going to be the mentor and the mentee, but also think about who else might be affected: parents, teachers, the mentor's employer, etc. The second step is to consider the ethical principles or guidelines that apply to the situation. Here, you need to consider whether or not there is a guideline in the respective agency's series of guidelines that directly states what behavior should occur. If not, is there an ethical principle from the previous video that would apply? Often, several ethical principles will apply, and that's okay. The third step requires you to think about personal biases, stressors, and self-interest. Here, you need to reflect on whether you are being open-minded about the situation. Are you considering all sides, or only thinking about the situation in a way that is the most comfortable and/or beneficial for you? In the fourth step, you need to consider all possible courses of action. Here, it may be valuable to consult to come up with all possible options. In the fifth step, you need to consider the risks and benefits of all of your alternatives. Truscott and Crook suggest that you consider whether the options satisfy preferences of the affected parties. They also suggest that you consider the following. Do the alternatives present new ethical issues? Do they address the ethical principles that are in conflict? Can they be practically implemented? In step 6, you will select a course of action based on the analysis completed in steps 1 through 5. Typically, this involves the option that seems like it will have the greatest benefits and the fewest harms. In the 7th step, you will implement your action, and in step 8, you will evaluate the result of your action. Is the dilemma resolved? Were there any unplanned harms? How did it affect the people involved? And if there were any unplanned harms, it is important that they be resolved. Let's take a look at how we could apply the decision-making model to a real ethical dilemma from a Big Brother Big Sister program. Here is the dilemma. You have been matched with your little for a long time. Every now and then, the parent calls you and your little to pick up a small grocery item on the way home. In the past, you have not minded doing this because it has never been more than $10 and the parent always pays you back. Yesterday, however, they asked that you pay the heating bill because the family will have their service disconnected if they do not pay within the next few days. The bill is well over $300. They promise they will pay you back and offer a statue as collateral. Clearly, the problem here is that the family is asking you for a substantial amount of money. Let's take a look at the ethical decision-making model. First, we need to consider the people likely to be affected. In this case, it is certainly the mentor and mentee, and additionally the family, and to a lesser extent the agency, will also be affected by the decision. Finally, if other children in the family also have mentors, these other mentors may be affected, as the decision may set a precedence for the expected behavior of these other mentors. Second, we need to consider the associated ethical principles and guidelines. Often, agencies may have guidelines that address financial transactions between mentors and families, and it would be important to consider whether the agency that you are volunteering for has a guideline that directly addresses this issue. In the meantime, let's look at the relevant ethical principles based on the previous video. Certainly, non-maleficence would apply. We want to protect the child from harm, which in this case is having no heat, as well as protecting them from harm of a potentially exploitative relationship between the parent and the mentor. Integrity also applies. We want to be forthright about our commitment and ensure that realistic promises have not been made to the mentee or their family, such as a willingness to offer money when in need. Justice may also apply. We don't want our decision around the issue to be influenced by any unfair biases we hold towards the family based on any characteristics such as race, religion, social economic status, etc. Finally, autonomy may also apply. The mentee may be embarrassed by this request and might ask that you not tell the agency. However, you may not be able to maintain the mentee's confidence in this case. Following along with the ethical decision-making model, you are next required to think about personal biases and self-interest. Here, you might feel badly for the family and may want to help out, or you may be irritated that they are asking you and feel quite angry. You may also think about your own financial situation and the incredible strain that would come from giving the family $300 without knowing that it will absolutely be paid back. In steps 4 and 5, you are required to consider and evaluate your options. One option may be to give the family the money. This might be beneficial because it alleviates the problem and ensures that your mentee is in a warm home. However, this may be problematic because it violates the terms of the relationship, sets a precedence for future requests, violates your personal boundaries, and puts incredible strain on your financial situation. In addition, it might create an unhealthy dynamic between you and the parent, as there would naturally be an imbalance of power. Another option may be to pay for part of the bill, but this would likely have very similar advantages and disadvantages to offering to pay the full bill. A third option may be to refuse to pay. This is beneficial because it protects you in your financial situation, maintains the integrity of the relationship, and avoids an unhealthy power dynamic, but may also be problematic as the family is still without heat and may be angry at you for not helping them out. Finally, a fourth option may be to discuss the issue with the governing agency. This may be advantageous because they may be able to guide you and the family towards an appropriate resolution and may have information about social service agencies that can support the family through their difficult time. As mentioned, this may also, however, be embarrassing for the child, and they may be mad at you that you told someone about the problem. The next step requires that you choose a course of action. In this case, it seems that the option with the greatest benefits and fewest problems would be the final option of discussing the situation with the governing agency. In this case, you are working to ensure that the mentee is not harmed, you are maintaining integrity of the relationship, and you are respecting both the family and your own boundaries and rights. While the mentee may be upset with you for disclosing this information to the agency, you may be required to do so anyways, and it is likely that this would not only be identified at the outset of the relationship, but it would also be reiterated by the agency during their involvement. In the final steps, you are required to then implement your course of action and evaluate the outcomes. Here, you would move ahead with calling the agency and then work to determine whether the situation has been resolved and whether any unforeseeable harm occurred. Now that you've had a chance to consider the ethical decision-making model, you need to try this process on your own. Please proceed to the next activity in the module where you will have a chance to apply the ethical decision-making model.